Join From Beer to the Bible every week as Ervin Lee and co-host Sarah Oliveira-McDonald warn others of the consequences of drug and alcohol addiction by being the voice of faith-based recovery. Every week, Ervin and Sarah help people get access to the treatment and counseling they so desperately need. They explore the depths of addiction and give practical life examples of how to recover and develop a new rhythm of living. The show is gritty, authentic, and simply raw while being rooted in the love, faith, and hope of God. Welcome to From Beer to the Bible.
Hi, everyone. My name's Aaron Stacy. I'm special guest host on the From Beer to the Bible podcast today. We're going to be diving into a story of, resentment, faith, recovery, redemption, and I'm honored today to have a very good friend of mine, Will Paz, on the show. We're really excited to hear his story. I've been able to be a small part of that in some way, and have had the honor to, work with Will, get to, hear about his life and how that's been with his walk with God. And so today we're going to have Will, and he's going to give you guys a snapshot of what his life has been like from, as a young adult or a teenager until now. So just wanted to welcome Will to the show. And if, Will, if you'd like just to, tell everyone, who you are, what you do, and then, let's get into what it was like for Will growing up in Colleyville, Texas, and, being a young guy that, grew up in a, Christ-centered home and, had his troubles and, with addiction and fear and resentment.
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. My name's Will Paz. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. I just celebrated 5 years sober on February 1st. Currently, I do business development for Guardian Recovery, so I get to help people from all over the world kind of get that extra help at a residential treatment center and detox. But I'd say most importantly, I'm a man of faith, and Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and I've been able to really use my recovery to really enhance my walk with Christ. And and like you said, I'm originally from California, but I grew up I think we moved in '89, so I was like 4 years old. I grew up in Colleyville, Texas, Colleyville, Grapevine area. So that's where I spent most of my time before I tried moving around from my disease.
And so I know, we were talking earlier before the show started, and, your parents were, born in Cuba.
Yep.
So you were the first generation Cuban American. Yeah. So, but I wanted to, you to kind of talk about, when this really all started for you, I know we talk about sometimes and, 12-step ministry and in 12-step rooms. I think it's a very common theme that I identified with there was this sense, or this hole in the soul, this, emptiness, this loneliness, and, things when I was a kid where before I ever picked up, drugs or alcohol, I had this sense that I didn't belong. And, I just, if you want to kind of dive into that, I know you pretty well, but just so the people that are going to be viewing this kind of know, what that was like for you and when you started to identify that and how that progressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say I was always a little bit, I felt like I was a little bit different. I came from a pretty good home, like my parents were good to me. We had our own struggles, and, I'll kind of dive into that in a little bit. But, I'd say for me, I kind of felt a little bit different. I had trouble fitting in. My entire well-being was other-centered, people-pleasing, trying to do things so others would basically like me. Right. And, that really, really, I think, caused a lot of problems as a kid growing up. I definitely think that I had some, I say this, some struggles with my dad growing up, maybe some miscommunication, some things that we didn't really get along well with. But for all intents and purposes, I was raised in a good home. I went to good schools. I went to things. enough was never quite enough for me, and I felt different from the rest of everyone, and I think that was always kind of a primary driver for me struggling. As you mentioned, my parents came over from Cuba. I was born Catholic, and my walk in faith was always kind of a confusing one. I'd say around 13, 14, a friend of mine that I had grown up with, I went to his dad's church. And really the driver for me going to that church, again, was to fit in. I didn't really relate to what they were preaching about, but like everybody from my school was going, all my friends were going, and it just kind of seemed like the cool thing to do.
I think, too, it's like we're looking for like some type of community, fellowship, somewhere where we belong,
100%.
And can connect with people. Yeah, I know. And I know I've talked to you a lot over the years about, different variables of your life and experiences. And it's a lot to remember every detail. But I know that was one thing with us that we, both identified with. And so you're going to this church, you're looking for community, fellowship. And I know for me, I don't know if this was your experience, but with the church too, but I remember early on my perception of everything I was learning there was very skewed and negative, even though I don't think that's what the church was thinking, or saying to me, right? So what was your experience like in that church now that you're in that position, you're going there looking for community and fellowship?
I'd say it was a really good experience, and the benefit was that I got saved when I got baptized, and it led my mom and my sister to the Lord at the time, and so there was God was always using me. I'd say that I had a hard time really understanding and relating to what they were talking about, or when it came to studying Scripture, I didn't really understand, and I think this is a common theme throughout my addiction is that I felt like. I always felt unworthy of God's love, God's grace. And so I really think that kept me from struggling to connect. Now, the community piece I absolutely loved. The friends I made, the church I went to, it was great. I loved all of that. But I as far as me connecting to the Lord, I felt like that was a tough thing for me to do at that age, which ultimately I would, end up going into a different direction, of course, which would...
Yeah, and I'd love you to talk more about that too, where, the addiction piece, started to be active. I truly believe that addiction started way before we ever picked up the substance. But when was that first experience for you? And, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I'd say, like I was saying, I always felt uncomfortable in my own skin. And I think when I was a teenager was probably like the first time I actually drank. And
was that like you got together with some friends or, what happened? Tell us the story and what that looked like. Yeah.
It was at my best friend at the time's house, his parents went out and they had, the liquor bottles all over the fridge, and we decided we'd break into it and drink, and I think we were just trying to be like the rap videos we used to watch or whatever. But it was I think I remember the feeling the most, which was I finally felt like free from all of this. It was a solution for me, but there were consequences for it. His parents came home. They had a little marker on the bottle, and we tried filling it with water. And and then I got taken home to my parents, and it was not a fun experience. But I do remember the feeling. That's what I resonated connecting with the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with my experience as well, I identified with that. The first time it was like a sense of ease and comfort that I had never, haven't experienced in a while, and I wanted more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to figure out how I could do that again, and so you said there were some consequences. Were those just the beginning? And how did this continue to progress for you? As I know addiction is a chronic and progressive disease.
Sure.
And so let's talk a little bit about that and some of the hardships that are surrounding that. And
Yeah, absolutely. My disease progressed. I mean, that was just the beginning. My disease obviously progressed extensively. But I would really say where it really started to like kind of pop off is I went through like kind of a string of what was tough for a teenage boy to experience. My parents got divorced. My grandfather, who I looked up to and admired very much, died, and then my first love, was cheating on me. And so I think compounded with all those three things with a guy that didn't know how to process emotions and was already feeling like he wasn't enough and left out. Like I had no outlet, I had no coping skills, and I really started turning to drinking for relief, which eventually led into drugs and just a whole lot of partying.
Yeah. I know we've talked about that before, and that was an experience I had similar to you. Was when I was 14, I caught one of my friends with my girlfriend, and I remember that spiraled my addiction, because I already had this idea, and I'm sure you relate, is that I wasn't good enough anyway. So it just reinforced that belief I already had about myself, which no one really told me that. My family believed in me. Sure. I believe God loved me in some way, but in my mind, I couldn't connect those dots that was authentic and real, and I was deserving. And so, would you say after you found out your girlfriend was cheating, how did that shape and mold your addiction, and like how you saw yourself, how you saw God?
Oh yeah, I mean, it destroyed me. I mean, I think and look, this is exactly what living a life without God, really connected to God, looks like. My entire well-being was placed on the attachment of others. In other words, I made people, places, and things my God. And so with that, humans are fallible. And so when a person does what a person does, which is fall short, because we all do, right. It has the power to kill. And so, and that's one of the main one of my main focuses in my recovery is, what I want to share about today, I guess, is resentment. Resentment, that was what really created a deep-seated resentment, along with the resentment I had towards, my dad, and along other things. That has the power to just completely poison and destroy your heart. Which
Absolutely.
Further perpetuates the disease, and it becomes everybody else's fault. Like, I'm the victim, poor me. Like, and again, it's just me giving people, places, and things that power over me.
Right.
Is really where it began and kind of started fluctuated.
And so during all that, you're what, 14, you said, ish? 15 years old when all this happened?
No, I would say, well, my parents got divorced when I was 17. So really, this really kind of started happening around 17, 18. Yeah.
So you're probably a senior.
Senior
in high school.
Senior, just
junior,
out of high school.
Senior. Yeah. So after all that happened, was the addiction piece prior to that, was that affecting, your grades? Was it affecting your hobbies? Was it affecting, and this idea of who you were and this low self-worth and, insecurity? How did that show up in like other areas of your life that it was deteriorating possibly? I know for me, I was, a basketball guy.
Yeah.
And once that took over, all my hobbies, interests, things that I used to love so much, it started to go away.
Yeah.
So I want to hear a little bit about for you, because I think, for some of the listeners that are younger or older, I mean, I think it's, for me, when I was in treatment, hearing some of that stuff, I didn't feel so alone,
Sure.
and I was like, okay, these guys have walked through this. And also, too, it helped educate, families, too, when they start to see these things in their loved ones, so.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think really my disease started progressing, I'd say, after high school.
Okay.
But, like I always struggled with school in general. Like I just didn't want to be there. It was boring to me. I've heard that's a sign of high intelligence. I don't know, but I'm gonna run with that.
Yeah.
But really, I had no desire to do the right thing. And it was always about Will and what Will wanted to do in Will's way. Now, to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I would say I was a pretty good kid outside of that, and I had a ton of hobbies. I loved sports. I loved hanging with my friends. I loved being social. I loved video games. I loved all of that stuff. But really, when the disease took hold, it started progressing in a way that I don't think I really realized the gravity of it until my late 20s.
Yeah.
But I think my identity started becoming attached to the party version of Will, right?
Right.
And so everything else kind of got left. Any types of dreams, ambitions, anything. I literally lived for the party life, like I lived to be that guy.
And what was the payoff in that for you? When getting to have that identity, living in that world, what did that, what was the payoff of all that for you?
Yeah.
Because there's always a payoff, right? Like we do something because there's a reward that we believe there's something we're seeking behind that, right?
Yeah, I think it was definitely ego-centered, but it was just feeding that sense of belonging that I lacked. That sense of like when I was the life of the party when I was drinking, and so or using, and so I felt like I had like come alive, like I had a sense of purpose,
Right.
And really that's what I lacked. I didn't have a whole lot of purpose. And my attachment became to living in that party life where people are like, well, it's so fun to be around. Like, I'd go out, dance, I'd go out and do all these things, and people were like, you're really good at that. And
Yeah.
so it was just like a way to I felt like a sense of belonging,
Yeah.
because I was never comfortable enough in my own skin.
Yeah.
So it's like I needed to attach myself to these positive affirmations that people were telling me, even if they weren't the right people to be around or
Absolutely.
the right scenario.
And I appreciate you talking about that. And that's what a lot of us do that are dealing with addiction or mental health, and we're searching for validation,
Sure.
In community. And so I wanted to kind of pivot here into when did the intervention happen? When did did you have any type of consequences beyond the initial at the party you guys are trying to be slick and get mom and dad's liquor, you have your friends, and outside of that, I know for me eventually things there were little things that came up and there was a change in my appearance, change in my behavior, there were signs, right? And so and then obviously I know for guys like us, a lot of times we don't stop on our own.
Yeah.
There's some type of thing, an interruption in between, and sometimes that doesn't happen right away. We want to get better, we believe it, we promise, but so I wanted to hear a little bit about where you're off to college now, correct?
Yeah, I didn't really do college.
Okay.
I made a couple failed attempts at it, but
Yeah.
The party life took over. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I could give you. I mean, that's just the beginning of my story. Truthfully, like I said, I didn't realize I had a problem to my 20s, and my disease progressed insanely. I went from drinking to doing hard drugs, like I was doing cocaine, I was doing ecstasy, and then eventually I was doing, I did pills, and eventually I did meth.
Right.
And that it just progressed into stages, and it got worse and it got worse. And what I noticed was that all the people I used to party with when I was my college age, they started growing up, and I started staying here. And so it perpetuated the need to run from myself. I was living a fast life. I was serving. I was bartending.
Yep.
I was doing all the things that, just living in that life. And you talk about consequences. I was in and out of jail. I think the first time I went to jail was my 21st birthday. And then I went again on my 30th birthday, and, I lost countless relationships, burned tons of bridges. And the consequences were never enough. They just weren't. I think my family kind of kept hoping that, like, when I went to jail, if they left me in there for a little bit, I'd get out, and, that would be the lesson. And it certainly wasn't. I'll never forget my 30th birthday. I was sitting on a bed with a meth pipe, and people were texting me at midnight, you made it to 30, happy birthday. And I'm just thinking, like, how miserable it is. 2 weeks later, I would get arrested at work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I would catch a felony charge. And
that must have felt, humiliating, I assume, at the time.
my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a wild story in its own. Like, I literally got chased around my place of work and got hogtied.
Oh my God. Where, I mean, you don't have to say where you were working, but were you in Dallas? Where were you?
No, I was in Houston.
You're in Houston?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's another common theme of my history is I kept trying to run for myself, and everywhere I was, there I was.
Well, I mean, and that's really good to talk about a little bit, is because I think, although I believe geographical changes can be helpful in trying to create space and distance between someone's, stomping grounds and trying to, have more of that, more hurdles in between that, right? When someone's trying to get well or, do something. But a lot of times people like myself have avoided responsibility, taking ownership, and trying to acknowledge what the real issue is, and just thinking, hey, I'm going to geographically move here. Yeah. I mean, I lived all around the country.
Sure.
I lived in Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. I was in Pennsylvania for a while. I was in Florida, right? And so, but the common thing was that I was there, right, every time. And so, I think that's a good piece to talk about is for you too, is like how those geographical changes and what that looked like for Will and, because I know sometimes we are able to pull it off even sometimes temporarily as well.
Well, and to your point, that was exactly my experience. I could pull it off. Like I would move and I'd have like 6 months, where I would do pretty well. And then I wouldn't, and for me, like, and this is the crazy part. Like for me, drugs were always the problem. Like it was like, if I just get rid of the drugs, I can still drink like a gentleman.
Right.
And I don't know anybody out here, so I can't find it, which is just complete delusion. I think addicts are the most resourceful people in the world. It doesn't matter, if you got that mindset, well, you're going to find it. But so like, I kept running from myself, and I would put together like 6 months of like no drugs, and then this is eventually later I had to become clear on the alcohol piece. But anytime I would drink, I would miss the mark that one time, and then I would be out searching for what I really wanted, and then it would all come crashing down again, and then I meet every single drug dealer in the city or town I'm in, and then now it's like I got to get out of here, and then same thing, repeat process. And so like everywhere you go, there you are. I couldn't outrun myself, which I spent a lot of time really trying to do. And I just thought, it's that external thing. Like if I just have this, it's going to fix it. If I just have this, if I have this relationship, if I move to this city, if I get this job, if I make this much money, this is all going to fix my problem. But the reality was the problem was me, and I didn't know how to fix that problem. You spoke about that hole in the soul.
Yeah. It's an internal,
internal condition.
And where was, I know you grew up Catholic, you were involved, I know you've spoken so highly about your family to me personally and other conversations we've had off the air. And so where was your relationship with God during all this? Were you still trying to pursue church? Did you have any relationships, anything you were doing to, No,
I think there was one. I would really categorize my addiction as like demonic. I was a tweaker. Yeah. So, there was multiple moments where I was seeing things not of this world. You know what I mean? And there was times, and so I had a belief that there was this evil thing that I was doing that was created like purely like in a demonic sense. But like I always felt on the other side of it, I was like, well, where is God? I felt abandoned. Like I felt like this thing isn't helping me, and where is he? And I tried going to church, I think once or twice in some of those brief stints of sobriety. But again, like I needed a process that would allow me to see that I'm in the way of my relationship with God. I needed an experience. I needed an intervention that was going to show me, hey, you're full of self, you're full of resentment, you're full of all these things that the enemy puts in your heart that poisons you and breaks your connection from me. Because it's like, even if God like walked up to me and was like, hey, here I am, I couldn't have seen it because I was so clogged up with self and so absorbed with all this stuff. And it was all me centered. And so I couldn't see I couldn't connect with him. And, so, I think that didn't really happen until after I got sober.
Right. And so in between, these, these geographical changes. Now, the progression of your addiction, you're using methamphetamines now. Feel like you're in this demonic world, which you hear a lot from, folks that are in recovery from methamphetamine. Actually, I've heard that a lot. And so, and there's a lot of psychological, consequences while you're using that with hallucinations and audio and visual and, and other different things. But during all this time and going to jail and all that, where was your family? Where was your mom? Where was your dad? Or what were they saying to you? What was that looking like? Or was that a relationship this estranged because you were avoiding them? I was curious to hear more about that.
I'd say my relationship was definitely strained. I mean, I would bounce around. I carried this resentment towards my dad. It was so senseless for probably 17 years over the divorce of I used to blame him for my addiction. Yeah. And it was crazy. I wasn't know until I got sober that I was able to actually get clear on what was actually happening and that I was being a victim. But, and then you're talking about a guy that showed up for me at every turn. Like when I got arrested, he was there. When I remember there was one time I flipped my car on top of me, he was there at the hospital. When I mean, there was just like, he was always there to help, and I was still blaming him for my problems. My mom, speaking of like the whole demonic, I mean, there was one time, I don't know if I had a bad batch or if I just had a psychological break, but I was living with my mom in Colorado, and, I'm seeing like demons, like this whole thing. Yeah. And I'm freaking out. My mom's praying over me with a Bible. Like she's terrified, like the whole thing, man. It was just insane behavior. Yeah. And I was losing my mind and I was deteriorating right in front of my parents' eyes and my sister. And I think, for a while they didn't know my parents are normies. So they don't drink. They don't, I mean, maybe occasionally once in a blue moon, but like they don't really, my sister's the same way.
There's no abnormal.
They're
not mirroring what you're doing.
So they don't know, and they don't, it wasn't until like my late 20s that they kind of started, like when they started finding things and seeing the change in me, that they were like, something's going on. And then when they started witnessing it, it became a lot. It became a lot. The relationship wasn't strained so much as they stopped loving me. Like they were just praying for me to just get well.
Well, and that's and I want you to continue, but I want to interject briefly, but I think it's a good point. There's a lot of families out there that really, today don't even know where to turn. Yeah. And they don't have the education of addiction and what to look for in their loved ones. And there are lots of resources for people today, which is a blessing, right? More than ever. But at the same time, when you're in your own world, you're working, you're raising your children, you're going to church, you're doing all the things you're doing. A lot of times it's harder for families that have never experienced it themselves or with a loved one to really know how to identify. And so, this is always really helpful for families too, because you're not alone in that as a parent, where you think, I have no clue what's going on and how do I truly love my son or my daughter. And I think the other part is as well that I like to talk about with families is that it's okay not to know, and it's okay to ask for help. And a lot of times, the way we love our other children that are non-addicted, the way we raise them is fine. So we have this experience with our loved one who's addicted, and we're using the same tools to raise them. And unfortunately, their addiction is much stronger than you know, and so asking for help and getting with people and letting people guide you and trying to have that humility as a parent is huge, So I think I wanted to talk about that briefly because a lot of parents experience what your parents are going through. Yeah. And it's okay because I believe Jesus is bigger than the church. I believe Jesus is bigger than AA. He's bigger than everything. 100%. And sometimes God shows up for us through these other people, and we needed to hear, and get that guidance. So sorry to interject on you there, but I just, you hit a good point there, and that's all I could think about was these, families, and how my parents were just like yours, right? So
yeah, and I think it's important. You hit the nail on the head, and I think I love working with families now, especially because of the damage I caused to mine, and then them not knowing any better and not understanding it. And I think the biggest thing you kind of touched on to take away too for family members is, I know my parents went through an immense amount of guilt. Like, where did I go wrong? What did I do? How did I fail you? And it's not. It had nothing to do with the way my parents raised me. It had nothing to do with, my parents are great people. They raised a good man. I wasn't willing to see it, but it had nothing to do with the way that they showed up in my life. It's just sometimes when you get this thing, man, you get it to no fault, and we get lost, and but God uses everything. That's the coolest thing. God uses everything,
right.
My testimony right now, my parents, like it uses everything. So yeah, anyway, I think I just would love for parents to understand that, you're doing the best you can. God's still there. He has not abandoned you. It's not your fault. And there are resources, there are tools, there absolutely are, on how you can better navigate this. And, just because one turned out good and one turned out lost doesn't mean the one that's lost won't be found eventually and turn out great.
Right.
That's definitely my experience.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, we've obviously, in your story as you're talking, you've gone past social drinking at this point, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough to identify it sometimes when the wheels have not completely come off in people.
Yeah.
Because some people are very high functioning alcoholics. Some people can carry that on for a long time, but typically when you get into this methamphetamine world, it's very glaring, or any other type of stronger substance of that nature. But for you, okay, I want to hear more too now, because I think, we've painted a pretty good picture of what has been going on in the spiritual condition, the internal brokenness, how that was playing out in your life and your relationships with folks, and your inability to maintain employment long term, to go to, dropped out of 2 schools, and so you're watching all your friends grow up, and they're getting married and buying homes, and Will's over here. Yeah. His mom's performing an exorcism on him, right? And so it's, but that's what it probably felt like for her, because I've seen folks on methamphetamine, and I brought people to local psych stabilization units that believed they were John the Baptist and believed that the rapture was coming, and we laugh, but it's funny looking back because you watch them heal and get better, but now what happens next? Like, where do you go from this? You're at your mom's. Now dad's concerned, mom's, praying over you, nothing's changing.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Yeah. I was in Colorado for a few years. My mom and I stayed at my aunt and uncle's, and I was supposed to couch surf there for 6 months, and I ended up being there for 2 years. And my disease did progress significantly. I went from smoking meth to using it intravenously.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I'd say everything just went down. I could definitely at least show up for work, but like once that happened, I'm stealing, I'm doing all kinds of crazy things that we do when we're active. So my dad ended up retiring in LA. He knew I was struggling, and he's like, hey, why don't you come out here, live with me for 6 months, we'll get your life together, and then you can get a place. He was flipping homes with my uncle at the time. He's like, maybe I can bring you into that, whatever. And so I knew that I was out of options. My aunt and uncle were pretty much done with me. I think at that point, they just didn't know what to do with me.
Right.
It's not that they didn't love me. It's just they didn't know what to do.
It's defeating.
Yeah, it's defeating. Yeah. My whole family was just defeated from me. I just drained the life out of all of them. My mom had to go back with my sister in Plano. And so, I'm out there by myself. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I leave, and I try living with my dad, and again, I still have that resentment there, man. And everywhere I go, and look, I'm gonna be honest with you, LA is not exactly the place to go for a struggling drug addict to get sober. You can find drugs anywhere.
Right.
I guess it's anywhere, but it was really.
I truly believe no matter where Will was, he would have found it. I know Aaron would have too. So it's. But no, I get what you mean, and so you're out there with your dad. And how do you end up in treatment? Like, when's their intervention happen?
Yeah.
Like, what? I want to start pivoting more into that.
Yeah.
Like, where? Will was, intervened on, and God said, hey, it's time.
Yeah. So, while I was out there with my dad, I got, I think I remember one night I got really, really drunk because I wasn't using, and me and him got into it, and really bad. And I just remember waking up in the morning, and I could to just feel the disappointment in him, and I finally agreed to go get a little bit of help. It was an intensive outpatient at the time, which, by the way, I would never recommend going to IOP for an active addict. First, if you're going to take that route, do a detox and residential treatment center. But that being said, I didn't know anything at the time, and I went. I couldn't stay sober in IOP. I'll kind of skip a lot, but I couldn't stay sober. They finally recommended I go to treatment.
And that's okay too, because sometimes you got to meet people where they're at. I think getting someone in, ideally, we'd like them to go the detox and treatment, but sometimes, you gotta, it's part of that process, right? So you go to IOP, they're like, hey, look, you need a higher level of care. Pretty much at this point.
I think I was able to stay sober for 2 months, I promise. And then I went back to, I told my family, hey, I'm gonna drink again,
So what happened when you're in that, you get a couple months sober, so you're stone cold sober.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why, what's going on that you drink again internally for you?
It's the delusion that I could be able to drink again like a normal person, and they talk about that in the big book. It was this, I think it was this separation that I was like, I'm just going to do this to appease my family. So one, I'm already not doing it for the right reasons. And then two, it's like, I want to be able to drink like a gentleman. Drugs are my problem. It's not alcohol. Again, the delusion of not really seeing what's happening, so I'm basically just kind of going there to dot my I's and cross my T's. And I'm waiting for the next moment to when I'm going to be able to have that next drink again.
Do you remember what that was like when you actually did it?
When I actually drank?
Yeah. Is that like a vivid memory for you, or was it, a thoughtless thing you just went and did, or?
Yeah, I think at first it wasn't that bad. I was able to kind of manage it a little bit.
Okay.
Which is always the hard part for alcoholics, because your disease will deceive you into thinking, okay, I was able to have a few drinks, I'm good. But then I noticed as I was getting off of work, it was getting a little bit more progressive, to the point, I remember my dad would have a glass of scotch and he would sit on that thing for a couple hours. By the time he's done with that, I'm already halfway through a handle of liquor.
Yeah.
So I just I don't drink normal.
Right.
And
so you got there, you drank again. How long did that go on for before, you had some type of intervention where you were able to?
4th of July.
Okay.
I'll never forget that one. So 4th of July, I missed the mark. I was out drinking my cousin heavily. I ended up doing some blow.
Yeah.
And which led me to want to find the one, the thing I wanted the most, which was meth. And so I went from having a few drinks to an all-night bender to finding it to being up for a week. And then at the time, COVID had just happened. So we're still doing IOP.
Yeah, so this is what, 2021?
2020.
2020, yeah.
And so we're still doing IOP, but we're doing it on Zoom. And the counselor could just tell, man, I'm turning it off so I can shoot up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just bad.
Yeah.
And so finally, I had a breaking point. They recommended the higher level of care. And, it's ironic that I work in treatment. I agreed to finally go to treatment. But I remember I put my admissions guy off for a month. Every day I said I was going to come to treatment, and I didn't. I'd make some excuse. I'd get high again until finally I had this. It was so uncomfortable living at my dad's, knowing he knew what was happening. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to protect my ego, make it look like I'm going to go to treatment.
Right.
And I'm not. And it was just this. It was insane discomfort. I'm losing my mind, and I have no other options. And my dad, I think, was just finally at that point where he was like, I don't want to kick you out, but I'm going to have to, you know? And for me, the only option was Skid Row in LA, and I just didn't want to end up out there. And I had this perfect moment of relief I hadn't used in 24 hours. And I remember looking at my old man, and I said, hey, it's now or never. And so we hopped in the car. I remember calling the admissions guy. He wanted to be put on speakerphone with my dad. So he's like, I don't believe you. And I went reluctantly. I fought it the whole way. And I really didn't have an experience until 2 weeks into treatment. I mean, I was ready to AMA the entire time I was there.
What was that like for you? I mean, I know for me, when I was in treatment, there was this high level of uncomfortability, which is pretty normal.
Yeah.
Especially when you're going through a detox process and, post-acute withdrawals, and you have this internal condition that's always, telling you, to do other things that you don't need. And, and we're always like, hey, I need this to be okay. Hey, I need this to be okay. Everything has to be perfect for me to get sober and stay sober. Right. And so what was that like for you when you were, going through that in treatment, and how did you overcome that? Like what changed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first week I was there, I slept because I was coming off of meth, but after that I was getting into regular disagreements with the techs. It was COVID. I remember one of them, I'll run through real quick. Like he was making us put our masks on. I remember taking a sip of coffee, took it down. He told me to get my mask on, and that was my 10th reason. I remember telling the guy there, hey, give me my stuff, I'm about to leave. And this tech, and this is really the moment that God showed up in my life. I remember telling this tech, give me my stuff, I'm going to leave. And he said, okay, why don't you sit down and talk to me for a few minutes? We sat down and talked, and I don't remember, it was this jumping off point. It was like, I was too scared to leave, but I was too scared to stay and get sober. And I remember I just started bawling in front of this man. And it was like I was hopelessly crushed and defeated. And I remember him saying, like, hey, man, if you want to leave, why don't we just give it 24 hours? If you still want to leave, I'll give you your stuff. You can go. But in the meantime, would you be willing to do something for me? And I said, yeah, sure, anything. And he gave me a piece of paper. On it was a list of names of alumni. He's like, ask one of these guys to sponsor you. And they did. I remember calling the first guy, he didn't answer. The second guy didn't seem that interesting. And the third guy ended up being my sponsor to this day, Ethan. And we were on the phone for 3 hours. It was like the first time I didn't feel alone. Yeah. It was the first time that I was, and he walked me through this process, man. And it really got me connected to the Lord. I ended up going back to church. I mean, like, it's just, I don't know, my life is just totally different today.
Yeah, you had that moment of surrender. Yeah,
absolutely.
And the ego, was no longer in the way of you getting the help that God's probably has been trying to give you for a long time.
For sure, yeah.
And I know, we have a little bit of time left, but just I'd love for you to cover, what you're doing now, the wins in your life from being a man in recovery, and I know you got a big day coming up here, in April. And, it's been an honor to watch your journey and be a small part of that in some way, and a friend, on the outside. I mean, I'm obviously really proud of you, and
thank you.
It's cool to watch God work in your life. So why don't you, real quick, before we got to, wrap everything up here, just talk about some of those things, with everybody, because it's the redemption.
Yeah.
God's glory.
100%. And I give all glory to God. And I think, I had to work those 12 steps to get the framework to really get connected to God. And when I walked back into church, it felt like I'd finally come home. My life today is completely different. Like I mentioned, I just celebrated 5 years sober. I'm engaged to the most wonderful, beautiful woman I've ever met. And most God-fearing woman. I mean, I just absolutely cannot say enough about her. A guy that was unemployable and couldn't maintain a relationship, you know what I mean? And so I have that coming on April 11th. Currently, I work for a residential treatment center called Guardian Recovery here in Plano, Texas, where we are always looking. My whole purpose in life is to help others the way that I was helped. To help others that are struggling, get them the help they need. So whether it's provide resources, get them into treatment, whatever. My number is always, my phone is always on, at 310-770-3836. Seriously, if anybody out there listening, call me. But that's what I do today. And my life is not without struggle. It's not perfect. And it doesn't need to be. I'm grateful for all of it. God is using me and working through me, and I'm able to actually help today and be present and show up for others and realize that it's not about me. It's not. And it's crazy the transformation the Lord has done in my life. So
absolutely, yeah. I agree. And I've I've known you the last 5 years about. Yeah. So it's been pretty cool to watch. Yeah, and if you guys are listening, you need anything, Will's a servant. He's always willing to help. And he always answers the phone and responds pretty quickly, and that's what you need with people that are in crisis. And I'm so thankful you were able to come onto the show. I'm honored that Ervin and Sarah gave me the opportunity to host it with you. That sure meant a lot. And
can I say one thing?
Yeah.
If you're out there struggling, me and Aaron are perfect examples of this. Jesus is waiting to save you. You are not too far gone. You are not too far broken. Nobody is beyond salvation. He's just waiting for you to turn to him. And that process can be scary and complicated. But all you have to do is accept him in your life, and it will change, I promise. You can call, and we will help. Anyway, I just wanted to say.
No, absolutely. I appreciate that. And, as we wrap up today, thank you, Sarah and, Ervin, for giving me the opportunity to, host this special guest host with Will today. And I just wanted to end it with a Bible scripture. It is out of the book of Ezekiel. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. That's the book of Ezekiel 36:26. And again, I'm Aaron Stacy, Director of Business Development at Banyan Treatment Centers. Will Paz, Guardian Recovery Network. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a blessed day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's From Beer to the Bible. Make sure to tune in next week when Ervin and Sarah gift you with even more addiction recovery information. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And remember, we're always there for you.